Tonight, Russia's President Vladimir Putin flexes his muscles and tests President Obama.
There is a logical contradiction in the Russian position and now its actions in Syria.
2016 Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina is here tonight to weigh in.
The biggest problem we have today is the Islamist extremist violence that has given birth to ISIL.
British Prime Minister David Cameron, he calls out radical Islamists. Why can't our president do the same?
He's a very insecure person. He doesn't like to be criticized.
He attacks me about nothing, but really attacked me quite viciously, and I fought back.
And it's a war of words between Donald Trump and Senator Marco Rubio. So who's coming out on top?
American blacks, over the course of this next year, will begin to see that they've been manipulated.
Plus, Dr. Benjamin Carson calls out the mainstream media. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark is here tonight to respond. Hannity starts right here, right now.
And welcome to Hannity tonight. After weeks of a military buildup, Russia has now begun an aggressive bombing campaign inside the war-torn country of Syria. Now, this comes after the Pentagon rebuffed a brazen demand from a Russian general who requested that the United States completely clear out of Syrian airspace. Now, keep in mind, for months, the U.S. has been waging an aerial assault against ISIS in that region. But that's not all. The Putin regime emphasized that these new Russian airstrikes are all part of a counterterrorism operation called against the so-called Islamic State. However, Fox News is reporting that the airstrikes occurred in a region of Syria that is not occupied by ISIS. So what does this all mean, and how should the U.S. respond to the latest example of Russian aggression? Here now with reaction. 2016 Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina. So they begin these airstrikes in areas that are not known to be held by ISIS. And then you got them, an official, Russia demanding that our warplanes leave the area. What do you think's going on here, and how would you respond if you're president?
Well, first, we know what's going on. Syria and Russia, who have had a long-standing relationship, Iran and Iraq are forming an unholy alliance. Russia's intentions are to shore up and stabilize the Assad regime. ISIS is sort of a camouflage. There is no doubt that Russia will be conducting airstrikes against anti-Assad rebels. Whether or not they happen to strike a few ISIS folks as well is, I don't know, to be determined. Here's what we need to do immediately, I believe. First, not only can we not withdraw our air support, but I believe we must tell the Russians that we will secure a no-fly zone around anti-Assad rebel forces that we're supporting. This is a tricky maneuver. It's a dangerous maneuver, but it's a maneuver that we must undertake because we must make it crystal clear to Russia that they do not get to move into the Middle East and become the dominant outside power, which is clearly their intention. Secondly, I would immediately call together.
Does that mean we might use force against Russian jets?
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully, if we are signaling clearly to the Russians our intention, it will not come to that. But if it does come to that, I think we must be prepared. Remember, Russian jets have been basically conducting dangerous and unpredictable maneuvers around our waters and our borders and our territory. So this is clearly a Russian aggressor that feels very confident. And why wouldn't they? Because Obama and Kerry have been unbelievably weak and surprised by all these maneuvers, although they should not have been. Because when General Soleimani of the Quds Force traveled to Russia on behalf of Iran, it was clear he was beseeching Russia to enter into this unholy alliance.
There's been no retaliation. There's been no repercussions for any of this Russian aggression, nor Chinese aggression hacking into our government system. So what we have here is, it seems to me like this is Putin following through on a stated strategy to let Assad stay in power, the exact opposite of what the United States has been supporting and literally undermining our efforts in that region. So they are taking us on directly.
Yes, this is
how far are we willing to go here? Because if in a game of chicken against Obama, I say Putin wins.
Well, so far, yes, that is correct, and it's really a shame. You know, if you permit bad behavior, you get more bad behavior. So when we did not push back in any way on Russia's aggression into Ukraine, we get more bad behavior. What I would do as President of the United States is immediately call together the Turks. I would start arming the Kurds. My goodness, the Kurds have been asking us to arm them for 3 years. We haven't done it. We need now to engage the Turks, who have been asking us to work with them to secure a no-fly zone between the Turkish and Syrian border. We haven't really done that. We need to. We need to arm the Kurds, and we need to pull together our Sunni Arab allies who view all of these developments with great alarm and provide them with the leadership, the support, the materiel that they need to not only defeat ISIS, but also to stand up against Iranian, Syrian, and Russian aggression.
All right, we're going to have more coverage on this throughout the night tonight. I want to move on. You recently were at an event, one in which you had apparently had part of the stage collapse. That made a lot of news. But at another event, were condoms thrown at you by Planned Parenthood activists?
Yes, condoms were thrown at me, and several of the activists were dressed up like birth control dispensers. You see, it's all part of their act to try and convince people that this debate we're having about butchering babies is actually about birth control or women's health. It's, of course, no such thing. It's about butchering babies for body parts. But nevertheless, they're throwing condoms, hoping it will make a difference. I think the American people are smarter than that, and I will not be silent on this issue.
Now, they had the hearings yesterday. The Planned Parenthood president went on television last night and claimed that anybody questioning the selling of baby body parts for Lamborghinis is somehow sexist. Here's what she said.
I mean, I do think some of the comments were pretty sexist, but actually I think it was because they didn't have anything else to talk about. But it seemed like they didn't really want to talk about any issues that were relevant to the topic at hand. And frankly, I was a bit dismayed at how little the many members of the committee even knew about women's health at all.
Now, on top of that, Carly, you had Barbara Boxer, the senator from California, and you had the Planned Parenthood executive vice president, both personally going after you, and I want to get your response. Let's play them both.
It's terrible to see a woman, the only woman running for president, attack Planned Parenthood that helps so many millions of women. It's a sad day, but it's the way it is. Not all women are going to fight for women. Carly Fiorina does not. She fights for herself, and she'll say almost anything to get elected.
She is operating in a fact-free zone when it comes to Planned Parenthood. She is lying about footage about Planned Parenthood. She knows it, and she doesn't have a way out. I've, in fact, invited Carly Fiorina, as have all of our CEOs, and Cecile Richards, said, come to a Planned Parenthood, or come sit down with us at a table, and let's discuss this, because you are lying about Planned Parenthood, and you can disagree on abortion, but you have to actually operate from the facts.
You have not told one lie, Carly Fiorina. What's your reaction to that?
That's right. Well, oh gosh, where do I start? First of all, to say it's sexist to go after Planned Parenthood's lies is pretty rich. And in fact, when you mentioned those protesters who were throwing condoms at me, this woman said to me from among the protesters, I'm willing to sit down and talk to anyone. She said, why do you hate women? And at the time, I was surrounded by women of all ages. It is part of the game they play. When Barbara Boxer says, well, you know, she doesn't support women, this is part and parcel of Hillary Clinton's rhetoric. You know, Hillary Clinton once said when she was campaigning against Joni Ernst last year in Iowa, she said, well, it's not enough to be a woman. You have to be a woman who believes. And then she went through her litany of liberal talking points. In other words, it is Democrats and liberals and Planned Parenthood executives that don't want any distance between their orthodoxy and any other woman.
So Republicans
and
now
by the
are
way,
dealing with the issue.
up until this point in time, I'm sorry to interrupt, Sean, but up until this point in time, not only am I not lying, but Planned Parenthood has not, will not, cannot deny that this is happening, because it is. And if they care so much about women's health, why is it that Democrats will not agree to use taxpayer funding to support pregnancy centers all around this country?
Well, I think the Republicans,
why do they always oppose that?
They could take that $500 million a year, $500 million a year, and give it to other women's health groups that are not involved in the harvesting of baby body parts, and then they can't make the argument. Would you like to see Republicans take such a strong stand that under no circumstances will they fund it?
You see, I think that we must take a strong stand for a whole set of reasons. One, we have to demonstrate what we're about, what we believe in, what our values are. But secondly, we have to educate the American people about what this really is. Is President Obama, Barbara Boxer, all of these Democrats, are they really prepared to shut the government down over what is about $500 million that has nothing to do with women's health? This is an organization that funnels millions of dollars in political contributions to pro-abortion candidates. The question that I would ask over and over and over again is, number one, why have they not denied that this isn't happening? They cannot. But number two, if you are so concerned about women's health, then why are you blocking taxpayer funding for pregnancy centers all over this country? Pregnancy centers that do huge amounts of good work that must be privately funded.
Let's go to the latest Suffolk University USA Today poll. You are tied for second place at 13%. It's Donald Trump 23, Ben Carson 13, you're at 13. That is 49%. Of the Republican primary voters are saying they don't want a politician. And obviously a big increase for you. I'm sure you're happy with the numbers. What is your reaction to that? Well, how should we interpret that?
Well, I'm not surprised. You and I have talked about this before, Sean, but when 82% of the American people, this is from a Fox News poll of several months ago, 82% of the American people now think we have a professional political class that is more concerned with the preservation of its power, prestige, and privilege than on getting any work done. And so when you believe that, and there's lots of evidence to support that belief, by the way, it means it's Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. Gallup has been tracking this, and 75% of the American people now think the federal government is corrupt. That's a strong word. So when you believe that, and the facts support your belief, what you're looking for is leadership. And I think people are starting to remember, gee, ours was intended to be a citizen government. Why shouldn't citizens step forward and lead at a time when their nation calls upon them to do so?
Carly Fiorina, always good to see you. Thank you for your time tonight. And coming up next,
Sean.
Tonight, right here on Hannity.
Barack, you said, and you're quite right, that every religion has its extremists. But we have to be frank that the biggest problem we have today is the Islamist extremist violence.
Why can't President Obama ever say that? He could learn a thing or two from Prime Minister David Cameron. We'll check in with Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, Colonel David Hunt. They'll weigh in on Obama's naive foreign policy agenda. Then, later tonight...
He's a very sensitive guy, and that's fine. That's his problem.
The feud between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio is heating up, as is the feud between Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. We'll explain that and more tonight as Hannity continues.